left behind and wounded. The lion cub's fight for survival will touch everyone. In the heart of the African savanna, where golden grass stretches endlessly and predators stalk under the burning sun, a small lion cub was left behind. Weak, wounded, and abandoned, he had no pride to protect him, no mother to shield him. The world believed his story would end there, another forgotten cry in the wild. But what happened when fate placed him in the path of a human willing to risk everything? This is not just a story of survival. It's a story of courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between the most fragile of creatures and the strength of compassion. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring you more inspiring animal stories that will stay with you long after they're told. Stay with us, because the journey of this wounded cub will not only break your heart, it will change the way you see survival itself. The African savanna stretched endlessly beneath the blazing sun, waves of golden grass rolling like an ocean of heat. Herds of antelope grazed in the distance, vultures circled high above, and the wind carried the faint growl of lions marking their territory. It was a world both breathtaking and brutal, where survival belonged only to the strongest and mercy was rarely found. On this particular morning, the cries of one small lion cub pierced the silence. They were thin, weak, desperate, so fragile that even the wind seemed to swallow them. The cub lay hidden among brittle grass, his tiny body shaking. A wound along his hind leg, raw and deep, told the story of what had happened. The pride had moved on days earlier, forced to abandon him when his injury slowed them down. In the cruel logic of the wild, one weak cub could not risk the survival of the whole. But the cub didn't understand logic. He only knew hunger, pain, and the loss of warmth from his mother's body. His eyes were wide, golden like the savanna itself, full of confusion and fear. Flies buzzed around his wound. His ribs showed beneath thin skin. Every attempt to rise ended in a stumble, followed by another cry that echoed across the plains. Miles away, Daniel Hayes, a 35-year-old American wildlife photographer, crouched beside his Jeep, adjusting the lens of his camera. He had been traveling through Kenya for weeks, capturing images of lions, elephants, and the fragile beauty of an ecosystem constantly under threat. Unlike many tourists, Daniel wasn't there just for photographs. He carried a deep love for animals, shaped by years of volunteering in sanctuaries back home in Colorado. That morning, as he scanned the grasslands through his lens, something unusual caught his attention. The tall grass swayed unnaturally and faintly, almost drowned out by the wind. He heard a sound. Not the roar of a lion, not the chatter of hyenas, but something softer, more heartbreaking. A cry. He lowered his camera and stood still, listening. There was again, thin and desperate. His chest tightened. It wasn't the sound of an adult predator. It was a cry of something young, something in need. Without hesitation, Daniel slung his camera over his shoulder, grabbed his field bag, and moved toward the sound. The closer he came, the more distinct the cries became, until finally he parted the grass and froze. There, curled into himself, was a lion cub, tiny, trembling, his legs swollen and bloody. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He had seen lions many times before, powerful and commanding, but this sight was different. Vulnerability radiated from the small creature. His golden eyes met Daniel's, not with aggression but with a plea. Kneeling slowly, Daniel whispered, "Hey there, little one." His voice was gentle, though he doubted the cub understood. But tone was universal, and the cub stilled, watching him carefully. The wound was bad. Too bad for cub to walk far. Too bad for him to survive alone. Daniel's mind raced. In the wild, intervening could be dangerous, not only for him but for the cub. If the pride returned, they would see Daniel as a threat. If he moved the cub, he risked angering the delicate balance of nature. But leaving him here meant death within hours, whether from starvation, infection, or predators waiting for weakness. Daniel's fingers tightened on the strap of his bag. "If I leave you, you won't make it," he murmured. "If I help you, maybe, just maybe, you'll have a chance." The cub whimpered as though answering. Daniel pulled a small claw from his bag and reached carefully. The cub flinched but didn't attack. He dabbed gently at the wound, cleaning away dirt and flies. The sight broke him. The leg was swollen, skin torn where teeth or claws had struck. Perhaps a rival cub, perhaps a hyena attack. Whatever the cause, the pride had judged him too weak. Not anymore, Daniel whispered. "You're not alone anymore." Lifting the cub was harder than expected. Though small, his body was tense with fear. He squirmed weakly, letting out soft growls that lacked strength. Daniel cradled him close, murmuring reassurances as he carried him back through the grass toward the Jeep. The cub's heartbeat fluttered against his chest, fragile but present. Back at the vehicle, Daniel placed him gently on a folded blanket. The cub whimpered, eyes darting, but exhaustion soon overtook fear. Daniel worked quickly, cleaning the wound properly with the antiseptic wipes he always carried. He tore strips of cloth to fashion a bandage, wrapping the leg carefully. As he worked, memories surfaced, his father teaching him to patch up the family dog after a hunting accident, his years volunteering at animal shelters, the countless times he had told himself he couldn't save them all, but could at least save one. When he was finished, the cub rested more comfortably, though pain still clouded his eyes. Daniel poured water into a small bowl and set it near him. To his relief, the cub lapped weakly, thirst overcoming fear. Sitting back, Daniel exhaled. The African sun burned overhead, but for a moment all he saw was the fragile life before him. He had come for photographs. Instead, he had found a fight worth more than any picture. But even as relief washed over him, doubt crept in. What now? He couldn't release the cub back into the wild. Not yet. Not like this. He could try to bring him to a sanctuary, but the nearest was hours away, and every mile carried risk. And what if the pride found his scent? What if they attacked the Jeep to reclaim what was theirs? As the cub closed his eyes and drifted into uneasy sleep, Daniel leaned against the Jeep and stared across the endless grasslands. Somewhere out there, the pride was moving on unaware, or perhaps unwilling to remember, the cub they had left behind. Daniel clenched his jaw. "I'll get you through this," he said softly. Somehow. But in the distance, a low rumble rolled across the plains. Not thunder, not the hum of trucks. It was the laughter of hyenas. Daniel froze, heart pounding, as the sound drew closer. The cub stirred, his tiny body trembling. Daniel's hand tightened on his bag, his eyes scanning the horizon. The first shadow moved among the grass. Then another. The scavengers had smelled blood. The cub was no longer abandoned. He was hunted, and Daniel realized with a cold certainty, saving him had already become a battle for both their lives. The sound of hyenas carried eerily across the savannah, a grotesque chorus of laughter that sent shivers down Daniel's spine. He froze, scanning the tall grass beyond the Jeep, his heart pounding in rhythm with the deep, guttural echoes. He had heard hyenas many times before, during night camps from the safety of vehicles, but never had the sound felt so close, so personal. The cub stirred on the blanket, letting out a pitiful cry that seemed to answer the predators. Daniel's instinct screamed to act. He pulled his binoculars from the dashboard and pressed them to his eyes, scanning the swaying grass. Their movement, slender shapes sliding low, mottled coats blending perfectly with the golden landscape. First one, then three, then five. Hyenas, drawn by the scent of blood, their noses lifted as they stalked toward the source. "Not today," Daniel whispered under his breath. He looked down at the cub, who was trying weakly to sit up, his wounded leg trembling beneath him. "Stay down, little one. I've got you." His mind raced. He had no weapon. He'd never believed in carrying one. Just a camera bag, a Jeep, and a heart that refused to leave the cub behind. But now the reality pressed in. He was standing between a wounded cub and a pack of hungry predators that wouldn't hesitate to tear both of them apart. The first hyena emerged from the grass, its face marked with old scars, its eyes burning with hunger. It stopped just beyond the Jeep, head low, sniffing the air. Another followed, then another, circling, testing. Daniel grabbed a long metal pole he used for his camera tripod and slammed it against the Jeep's frame with a loud clang. The metallic echo rang across the savannah. "Back off!" he shouted, voice raw with adrenaline. The hyenas flinched at the noise, but only for a moment. They knew their numbers. They knew he was alone. One barked sharply, the sound carrying like a cruel laugh. Another edged closer, its body low, muscles twitching. Daniel's breath quickened. He glanced at the cub, who whimpered and pressed against a blanket as if trying to disappear. For a moment, the photographer's heart broke. This wasn't just a cub. This was a child of the wild, betrayed by his own pride, and now facing death again. "I won't let it happen," Daniel muttered. He yanked open the Jeep's door and started the engine. The roar cut through the air like thunder. Dust kicked up as the tires spun against the dry ground. The hyenas stepped back, uncertain, their eyes gleaming. Daniel revved the engine harder, then slammed the horn. The blast echoed across the plains, sending birds scattering into the sky. The pack hesitated, circling wider. One brave hyena lunged closer, but Daniel accelerated forward just enough to send a wave of dust at it. The animal yelped and retreated. Slowly, grudgingly, the pack withdrew into the grass, their laughter fading but never disappearing completely. They were not gone. They were waiting. Daniel exhaled, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He leaned his head back, sweat dripping down his temples. For a moment, relief washed over him, but then the reality returned. He couldn't stay here. The hyenas would follow. The cub's blood was a beacon. He turned to the small creature on the blanket. The cub's eyes were wide, fixed on him as if trying to understand. Daniel knelt, brushing a hand gently over the little head. "We have to move," he said softly. "I know you're tired. I know you're hurting. But if we stay, we don't survive." Carefully, he lifted the cub again, cradling him close. The tiny body trembled, not just from pain but from fear. Daniel carried him into the Jeep, laying him gently on the passenger seat. The cub whimpered, pressing against the folded blanket Daniel tucked beneath him. Daniel adjusted his GPS, searching for the nearest sanctuary he had marked days ago, hours away. Every mile would be a risk, every moment a test, but it was the only chance. He pressed the accelerator, the Jeep jolting forward onto the rugged trail. As the vehicle bounced over uneven terrain, Daniel kept glancing at the cub. Each cry twisted his chest, but each breath was also a reminder he was still alive. The sun rose higher, scorching the savannah. Heat waves shimmered off the horizon. The cub panted heavily, his tiny body struggling against exhaustion. Daniel opened his water bottle, dipping a cloth and pressing it gently against the cub's lips. The cub licked weakly, his tongue rough against the fabric. "You're a fighter," Daniel whispered. "I can see it. Don't give up now." Hours stretched long. Dust clouded the air. The trail seemed endless, and still the cub fought to stay awake. Daniel hummed softly, a habit from his childhood when he used to calm stray dogs with a tune his mother once sang. To his surprise, the cub's breathing slowed, his eyes closing, soothed by the sound. But peace was short-lived. A sudden jolt rocked the Jeep, a sharp crack beneath the wheels. Daniel slammed the brakes, cursing. He climbed out and crouched by the tire. A jagged rock had torn through the rubber. Flat. Panic surged. He had a spare, but time was not on his side. The scent trail they left behind was strong. The hyenas could still be near, or worse, other predators. He worked fast, wrenching the bolts with sweat slicking his hands, glancing at the tall grass every few seconds. Each rustle made his heart leap. The cub cried softly from the seat, as if sensing the danger. Daniel forced his voice steady. "Almost there, little one. Stay with me." Minutes crawled like hours, but finally, the spare tire was fixed. He tossed the damaged one into the back, slammed the trunk, and leapt into the driver's seat. Dust flew as the Jeep lurched forward again. As the horizon stretched on, Daniel's determination grew sharper. He wasn't just transporting a cub anymore. He was carrying a promise that this fragile life, left behind to die, would not be forgotten. But as the sun dipped lower, shadows stretched long across the savannah, and in the rear-view mirror, Daniel caught sight of movement, dark shapes running low in the grass, keeping pace with the Jeep. The hyenas hadn't given up. They were still there, relentless as the hunger that drove them. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then chase us," he muttered. "Chase us all the way to Hope. But you won't take him." Beside him, the cub stirred, his tiny paw reaching toward Daniel's arm as though clinging to him. And for the first time since he had found the wounded creature, Daniel smiled through his fear. They were not alone anymore. And as the last light of day bled across the savannah, man and cub drove on together, Two survivors bound by chance, pursued by shadows, fighting not just for life but for the fragile miracle of trust. The Jeep rattled along the uneven dirt road, its tires spitting up clouds of dust that shimmered in the dying light of the African sun. Daniel's hands were tight on the steering wheel, his knuckles white with focus, his jaw clenched as he pushed the vehicle harder than it was meant to go. The little lion cub shifted weakly on the folded blanket beside him, golden eyes half open, his chest rising and falling in fragile rhythm. Each breath the cub took reminded Daniel why he could not stop, why turning back or giving up was no option at all. Behind them, the laughter of hyenas had finally faded into silence, but Daniel knew better than to trust that reprieve. Hyenas were cunning. They had followed his trail for miles already, lurking in the tall grass, testing his resolve. He imagined their mottled coats flashing in the twilight, their jaws dripping with hunger, their eyes glowing as they tracked the scent of blood. The cub's wound was like a beacon across the savannah. "You hang on, little one," Daniel murmured, glancing sideways at the cub. His voice softened as if speaking to a child. "I'm going to get you to safety. I promise." The cub blinked, his head tilting weakly toward Daniel's voice. His paw shifted, brushing against the blanket, and Daniel felt something stir deep inside him. He had seen animals before, suffering, abandoned, sometimes beyond help, but there was something different about this one. It wasn't just the wound or the cries. It was the way the cub looked at him, as though some fragile string had already bound their fates together. The road stretched endlessly. Every bump sent a jolt through the Jeep, and Daniel winced each time, afraid it might worsen the cub's pain. He checked the GPS again. 2 more hours until the sanctuary. 2 hours of treacherous roads, predators, and the ever-looming darkness. As night began to fall, the savannah transformed. The golden grass turned to deep shadows. The air grew cooler, and the sounds of nocturnal hunters replaced the cries of daytime birds. Jackals yipped in the distance, and once a lion's roar rolled like thunder across the plains. Daniel's chest tightened. If the pride that abandoned this cub caught his scent now, would they see him as a thief? Or worse, would they finish what they had started by leaving the cub behind? The cub whimpered softly, his ears twitching at the sounds of the night. Daniel reached over, resting his hand gently on the blanket. "It's all right. I'm here." The cub's trembling eased slightly, as if reassured by the warmth of his touch. Minutes dragged into hours. The Jeep's headlights carved thin tunnels of light through the darkness, illuminating dust and insects dancing in the beams. Daniel's body ached from tension, his eyes stung from strain, but he refused to stop. He knew that in the wild, stopping meant vulnerability. Suddenly, a pair of glowing eyes flashed in the headlights ahead. Daniel slammed the brakes, the Jeep skidding to a halt. The cub cried out at the sudden jolt, and Daniel's heart raced as he peered into the darkness. There, standing in the middle of the road, was a massive hyena, its body low, its teeth bared in a grotesque grin. Daniel cursed under his breath. Another pair of eyes appeared. Then another. Soon, 5 hyenas stood in the path of the Jeep, their silhouettes looming in the beams of the headlights. The pack had not abandoned the chase. They had been waiting, anticipating, cornering. The cub whimpered again, pressing against the seat. Daniel's protective instincts surged. He slammed the horn, the deafening blast echoing across the plains. The hyenas flinched but did not retreat. They began to circle, their laughter rising, chilling the night air. Daniel gripped the steering wheel, then made his choice. He pressed the accelerator hard, the Jeep lurching forward with a roar. Dust and gravel flew as the vehicle barreled toward the hyenas. For a moment, the predators held their ground, then scattered at the last second, darting back into the grass. Daniel sped forward, his heart hammering, sweat dripping down his forehead. When he finally slowed, his chest heaved with adrenaline. He glanced at the cub, who stared back with wide eyes, ears flattened. Daniel reached out, brushing his head gently. We're okay. But the encounter left Daniel rattled. The sanctuary was still an hour away, and he knew the hyenas would not give up. They would trail him, waiting for another chance. As the minutes crawled by, exhaustion gnawed at Daniel. His throat was dry, his body stiff. The cub shifted restlessly, his cries growing softer, weaker. Daniel pulled the Jeep over briefly under the shelter of an acacia tree. He poured a bit of water into the cloth and touched it to the cub's mouth. The cub licked at it slowly, too tired for more. "Stay with me," Daniel whispered. His voice cracked with emotion. "Don't leave me now." He thought about home, about Colorado's mountains, about the sanctuary where he had spent years helping rescue abused animals. He thought of the dogs he had saved, the wolves he had nursed, the small victories that had meant everything. And he thought of the cub's eyes when he first found him, begging not to be left behind. Gathering his strength, Daniel started the Jeep again. The road twisted through the darkness, the stars above blazing brighter than city lights ever could. The cub lay still, his breathing shallow but steady. Daniel kept talking to him, filling the silence with words meant to carry both of them forward. "You're going to see other lions. Little one, you're going to feel grass under your paws again. And maybe, just maybe, you'll run free." Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the outline of fences appeared in the headlights. The sanctuary gates rose out of the darkness like a promise, guarded by tall wire and watchtowers. Relief washed over Daniel so strongly, he almost wept. He honked the horn twice, the signal for entry. A guard appeared, flashlight cutting through the night. When he saw the Jeep and then the small cub on the seat, his eyes widened. He rushed to open the gates, waving Daniel inside. The Jeep rolled forward into safety at last. Behind them, the savannah stretched vast and endless, hiding the shadows that had followed them. But here, within these fences, hope waited. Daniel lifted the cub gently, holding him against his chest as he stepped from the Jeep. The sanctuary lights bathed them in soft glow, and for the first time since the cries in the grass, Daniel felt the weight lift. "You made it," he whispered. "We both did." But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The fight for survival was not over. The wound, the trauma, the fear, they would take time to heal. And yet, as the cub's golden eyes blinked up at him, Daniel felt certain of one thing. Neither of them would ever walk this path alone again. The sanctuary, bathed in the faint glow of lanterns and humming generators, should have felt like safety. Fences stood tall, guards patrolled with flashlights, and in the distance lions rescued from traps roared against the night, their voices a reminder that this place was built to protect. Yet Daniel could not shake the knot of tension in his chest. The cub rested in his arms, fragile and trembling, eyes half closed but still flickering with life. He had made it through the chase, through the hyenas, through the road. But now came the greater test. Healing. Staff rushed toward him as he stepped out of the Jeep. A tall Kenyan vet named Dr. Kamau pushed through the crowd, his medical kit already in hand. "Quickly," he ordered, his voice calm but urgent. Inside, Daniel followed, his boots crunching on gravel as they entered a small clinic lined with steel tables and shelves of supplies. The scent of antiseptic mixed with dust and the faint musk of wild animals. Daniel laid the cub gently on the table. The little body shivered, claws flexing weakly against the blanket. Dr. Kamau leaned in, examining the wound, his brow furrowed. "This injury has been festering. Infection has already begun. He is very weak." Daniel's heart sank. "But you can save him?" The vet did not answer immediately. He motioned for his assistants to prepare antibiotics, saline, and surgical tools. "We will try," he said finally. "But you must understand, survival is not guaranteed." Daniel gripped the edge of the table. He had risked everything to bring the cub here, and now the thought of losing him felt unbearable. He looked down at the cub, who blinked at him with clouded golden eyes. For a moment, Daniel swore the cub understood. That fragile look seemed to plead, "Don't give up on me now." They moved quickly. One assistant shaved the fur around the wound. Another swabbed it clean. The cub whimpered, his cries soft but piercing. Daniel bent close, murmuring comfort. "I'm here, little one. Just hold on. You're stronger than you know." As the procedure began, Daniel's mind drifted to the sanctuaries he had worked in back home in Colorado. He remembered wolves with bullet wounds, dogs beaten and abandoned, and how sometimes, against all odds, they had pulled through. He clung to those memories now like anchors. Then, just as hope steadied him, the clinic lights flickered. The old generator coughed and sputtered. The room dimmed. Dr. Kamal's voice snapped sharp. Not now. One of the staff hurried to the back, shouting over the hum. The storm. The lines are down. Generators failing. Daniel's heart pounded. Outside, wind picked up, carrying the metallic tang of rain and the growl of thunder. Shadows flickered across the clinic walls, stretching long and thin. The cub whimpered again, restless under the vet's hands. Keep him still, Dr. Kamal ordered. Daniel stepped forward, placing both hands gently on the cub's shoulders, steadying him. His touch calmed the little creature, who pressed his face into the blanket as if finding comfort there. The lights flickered again, then died completely. Darkness swallowed the room. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the pounding of Daniel's heart and the ragged breathing of the cub. Flashlights! Dr. Kamal barked. Assistants scrambled, fumbling in drawers until beams of harsh white light cut through the dark. They illuminated the cub's wound, the gloved hands poised above him, and Daniel's face tight with fear. Hold him steady, the vet said, his voice low but firm. We can't stop now. Daniel nodded, tightening his grip gently, whispering to the cub all the while. Stay with me. Stay with me. The storm outside crashed against the sanctuary. Rain hammered the tin roof. Thunder cracked like cannon fire, and wind howled through the trees. For a moment, Daniel imagined the hyenas still out there, laughing at the edges of the fence, waiting for failure. The thought steeled him. He would not let the cub be lost now. Not after everything. Hours dragged by. Sweat poured down Daniel's temples as he stood vigil, hands steady despite the tremors in his own body. The cub's breathing faltered at times, each pause a dagger in Daniel's chest, but somehow the fragile rhythm always returned. Finally, Dr. Kamal leaned back, his gloves stained, his eyes tired. The wound is cleaned. The infection has been flushed. Antibiotics are in his system. Now, he hesitated. Now we wait. Daniel sagged against the table, relief and dread colliding in his chest. How long? Through the night, Kamal said. If he survives until morning, his chances rise. If not, his voice trailed off. Daniel stroked the cub's head gently, brushing damp fur from his eyes. You hear that? Morning. Just make it to morning. The staff drifted away to tend to other animals, but Daniel stayed. He pulled a chair close to the table and sat, refusing to leave the cub's side. The little one stirred once, weakly pressing his paw against Daniel's hand. That small gesture nearly broke him. He covered the paw with his fingers, holding it like he might hold a hand of a dying child. Thunder rolled again, rattling the windows. Daniel thought about the road he had traveled, the dangers they had outrun, the promise he had made in the grasslands. He thought of the hyenas, relentless and cunning, and of the pride that had abandoned this cub. And then he thought of the bond that had already formed, fragile yet undeniable, between a man and a creature left behind. Hours passed. Daniel fought sleep, his head nodding only to jerk upright at each change in the cub's breathing. The storm slowly weakened, and with it, the flickering lights sputtered back to life as the generator roared again. At dawn, the first rays of sunlight filtered into the clinic, painting the walls in gold. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes heavy but searching. The cub was still breathing, shallow but steady. Relief surged through him, warm and overwhelming. But then a sharp cry echoed from outside, cutting through the morning calm. Daniel stiffened. It wasn't the cry of a bird. It was guttural, hungry and close. He rose, moving to the window, his body tense. Through the thin fence line, movement stirred in the grass. Shadows, more than one. The hyenas had returned. They had followed all the way, relentless, waiting for weakness. And as Daniel turned back to the tiny cub sleeping on the table, he realized the battle for his survival was far from over. The sanctuary had survived storms before, rains that bent the acacia trees, winds that rattled the cages of rescued leopards, and even poachers that had once tried to breach its fences. But this morning was different. The air itself seemed charged, heavy with tension, as if the land was holding its breath. Daniel sat beside the cub's table, his eyes bloodshot from a night without rest, his hand still resting lightly on the fragile paw. Every rise and fall of the little chest was a lifeline. Every twitch of whiskers a reminder that hope still lived. Outside, the hyenas had gathered. Their laughter rose in the gray light, cruel and mocking, echoing through the sanctuary grounds. The guards patrolled nervously, rifles in hand, flashlights sweeping the fence line. The predators lingered just beyond, pacing back and forth like shadows waiting for a crack in the defenses. They had followed the jeep for miles, driven by blood, and now the scent of the wounded cub still called to them. Daniel pressed his forehead to his hands. He had faced them once already, on the open road, but here the stakes fell higher. The cub was no longer just an injured animal. He was family now. Daniel thought back to that first moment in the grass, when golden eyes had met his. That connection had pulled him forward through fear, exhaustion, and danger. And now, as the predators closed in, Daniel realized that connection was what would carry him through again. Dr. Kamau entered quietly, adjusting his glasses, his expression unreadable. "He is stable," the vet said, his voice low, cautious. "But the night took much from him. If he does not gain strength soon," he trailed off. Daniel clenched his jaw. "He will," he said firmly. "He has to." The cub stirred at the sound of his voice, opening his eyes just slightly. There was weakness there, yes, but also something else, faint, flickering determination. The tiny paw flexed against Daniel's hand. It was enough. By midday, the sanctuary had settled into a tense rhythm. The storm had cleared, the sky blazed blue, but the hyenas remained. They lingered at the edges, circling, waiting for weakness. Daniel refused to leave the cub's side. He fed him drops of water, kept his wound clean, and whispered encouragement. The staff gave him space, respecting the strange bond that had formed. Hours passed. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the cub began to change. His breathing grew steadier. His eyes opened wider. When Daniel set the bowl of water near him again, the cub pushed forward weakly, lapping more than before. Daniel's chest swelled with relief. "That's it," he whispered. "Keep fighting." The moment of truth came at dusk. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon in fire and shadow. The guard shouted suddenly. The hyenas were pressing closer, their snarls louder, their shapes clearer against the fence. The cub whimpered at the sound, struggling against the blanket as though sensing the danger outside. Daniel leaned close, his voice fierce but gentle. "Listen to me, little one. You are not prey. You are not forgotten. You are a lion." The cub blinked at him, golden eyes catching the last light of day. And then, to everyone's astonishment, he pushed himself up, wobbling, trembling. His legs shook beneath him. Daniel's heart stopped. He was too weak, he would fall, but he didn't. Inch by inch, the cub rose, standing on his paws for the first time since Daniel had found him in the grass. Gasps filled the clinic. Staff froze, staring. Daniel's eyes burned with tears. "That's it," he said, voice breaking. "Show them who you are." Outside, the hyenas pressed closer, their laughter louder. But inside, the cub let out a sound that silenced them all. It wasn't much, just a faint, shaky growl, but it was real, a spark of the lion he was meant to be. Daniel dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. The cub staggered, then leaned against his leg, still standing. Daniel wrapped an arm around him, steadying him. "You're not just surviving anymore," he whispered. "You're fighting back." Dr. Kamau stepped forward, written across his face. "If he can stand today, he will recover," he said quietly. "He has chosen life." And as night fell, the hyenas slipped back into the shadows, their chorus fading. They had sensed it too. The prey was no longer helpless. Weeks passed. Each day brought progress. The cub grew stronger, his wound healing, his steps surer. Daniel stayed at the sanctuary, helping care for him, documenting his recovery with photographs that captured not just an animal, but a story of resilience. Word spread beyond the fences. The tale of the wounded cub rescued by an American photographer reached homes across the world. People called him by a name now, Jabari, which in Swahili means brave. By the time Jabari ran across the enclosure for the first time, his golden coat gleaming in the sun, Daniel felt tears in his eyes again. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was a symbol. Standing by the fence, Daniel whispered, "You were left behind, but now the whole world runs with you." The cub paused, turned back, and for a moment their eyes met again, just as they had on that first day. Daniel knew then that his journey, his risk, his sleepless nights had all been worth it, because Jabari's fight for survival had not only saved the cub, it had saved Daniel too. And as the sanctuary echoed with the roar of lions at dusk, Daniel believed, for the first time in years, that even the most fragile lives would rise, heal, and roar again. If this story inspired you, remember, courage and loyalty can overcome any challenge. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who believes in the power of hope, because sometimes one small roar can change the world.